Tapping into a community is one way to level up your content. Jimmy Daly, founder of Superpath and former VP of Growth at Animals, knows this firsthand. With one of the largest community of content marketers, he taps into community members to help fuel Superpath's content. I'm part of that community, just love it. Today, he shares his community-led content strategy. In this Marketing Powerups episode, you learn, first of all, why community is a content marketing power-ups. Second, how to create user-generated content with community members. Third, how to build a community from scratch. And number 4, a career power-up that's helped accelerate Jimmy's career. By the way, I've created a free power-ups cheat sheet to help you apply Jimmy's community-led content strategy to your business. You can get it for free at marketingpowerups.com or find that link in the show notes and description below. Are you ready? Let's go.
Marketing Power-Ups. Ready? Go! Here's your host, Rambly John.
You mentioned that community is your marketing power-up that you want to talk about. You're the founder and CEO of one of the biggest online communities for content marketers. Would you say that? Superpath? I don't know of any
Probably.
other. Yeah, 15,000.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks in there. I think it depends how you define community. You know, like to me, community in a business sense is like there is a tool that facilitates conversations and we have 15,000 people who have accounts. You know what I mean? I think some people use the term a little bit more loosely. You know, like I have heard folks describe a newsletter as a community. I don't know that I would. I mean, there's elements of it for sure. But I feel like without peer-to-peer conversation, it doesn't like really check the box for me. So I think, I don't know, maybe there's a larger one, but if there is, I'm not aware of it. Although there's a bunch of challenges with it being large too. Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think we faced the same when I was working at Product Led with West Bush. We reached like 10,000 and there's definitely challenges there. I mean, we'll get into that, but we've already started chatting about like why you see community as a power up to specifically content. And you share some examples. I'm curious what those are and how community can potentially power up content and everything else around marketing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, gosh, there's a lot here.
There's so much.
Yeah, I can talk about it in the way that we think of the community to content connection. I think it could look a little bit different for other businesses, but a community is an incredibly rich source of very honest conversation between peers. And if you can't find content ideas in that, you're never going to find them. You know, like we have published a lot of content over the last couple of years. All of it is rooted in things that we have discovered in the community. So we basically don't ever do keyword research. There's kind of no need to because we have 15,000 of our kind of target personas telling us sort of indirectly what they want to learn about. And I feel that's just like the best possible source of ideation for us. Another thing is that the conversations people have, you know, kind of depending on how you look at it, it's essentially user-generated content. There's a balance to be had there because these people are not having conversations to provide you with content. That's not the purpose of it. But there are times when we'll get permission from someone and turn a question or a post that they put up in response to a question and turn that into content. We do that actually quite a bit. And then we've also tried to facilitate the creation of user-generated content by giving people simple ways to give back to the community. I think our most popular version of that is a thing we came up with called the 100K Club. And the idea is that you could, so like once you hit 6 figures as a content marketer, you can contribute some knowledge about your own career journey back to the rest of the community. And we do it in an anonymous way. So if you don't want your name attached to it, that's okay. And basically we ask everybody, it's kind of like there's a series that I was inspired by called, it's called My Morning Routine. And it's basically like a bunch of people answering the same couple of questions and you learn about their morning routine. We do that with career milestones. So we'll ask everyone the same questions. We make a chart that plots out their salary from the time they started in content marketing till the time they hit 6 figures. And then we share those back to the community. And it's really cool because sometimes you see people, I mean, the reason that readers love it is because there's information in there that you can't get anywhere else. So it might be like, oh, like a we had one recent, it was like VP of content making $240K.
Dang.
And a lot of people were interested in that one, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes you get one that's like freelance writer making 120K or 160K. And to like learn about how that person got to this point in their career is really interesting. And so, but there's something important there, which is we try to create this very safe environment for people to share that information. That's a like kind of a golden rule of community, is that if it's not a safe, supportive environment where people will never be exploited or poked fun at or trolled or whatever, that it becomes quite a bit more valuable to them. And that is true for the content too. Like if you're going to ask people to contribute content in any way, it has to be done in a way that they feel super comfortable with. In this case, anonymity is what enables that. For other types of content, maybe that's different. But that's one thing I've learned, is that people are so willing to give back, but you have to create a framework for them to do it within and then make it very comfortable.
I remember seeing the 100K content series. It's like, this is genius, because it shows, inherent to it is this a before and after snapshot where you see that journey, and people who are reading it are like, how do I get to that 240,000 VP of content, and like kind of reverse engineer the journey, the career journey this person has. They might not have something similar, but maybe they can take away something like that. And that's why it's such a good, like actionable, aspirational, inspirational, all wrapped up into one piece of content. Is exactly, you're probably finding that feedback from other folks who are part of the community.
Definitely. Part of this for content marketers specifically is that the career path is not set in stone.
Right.
Something I have noticed, I'm generalizing, but a lot of content marketers are young. The people who create content are primarily, and again, I'm generalizing, but primarily are fairly young. And I think a lot of them become disenchanted with the career path when they start seeing what their options look like to grow within this industry. And then they start thinking about like, well, product marketers make more money than content. It seems like there's more upward mobility, or, maybe freelancing is better for me if I want to continue honing the craft of writing versus being kind of pushed into a management role that I don't really want, or they start thinking about social, or start thinking about email marketing, or, kind of some related field. Part of the reason we wanted to do this is just to give people some clarity, not every career path is the same, but if you look at a VP of content and you can see all the roles they've had and the salary they made at each one, it just kind of like shines some light on a potential path that you could also pursue as well.
I totally see that. I love how you put it, that it's giving potential options to the person where you might be peeking into. You mentioned like a morning routine, but another one I love binging YouTube series. One I've been binging is like a day in a life of blank, like a day in the life of a neurosurgeon or a day in the life of a nurse.
That's so interesting.
I would never want to be a surgeon. But it's a day in the life of a police officer. But it's interesting to see that path, and you're peeking into the potential and possibilities through this, and you're talking about exploring here. It's interesting. Yeah,
it's cool. We've tried to replicate this, and with some success, but I feel we really hit on something with the 100K club, because it's the number. Like people want to know salaries. You can't find out. But there are some other things we've done. Like we've tried to create other kind of like formulaic style content where you can ask the same questions but get different output each time. So like another one we did. We've done a few of these, is like my first 90 days on the job. So it's like,
that's cool.
Someone gets a new job, and then 3 months later we say, okay, answer these questions to explain like, what did you do in the first 90 days? How did you get acquainted with the product? What was the first, what did the strategy look like, or whatever? You can kind of imagine. And so I think that we'll probably do more of these things, but it does require some testing to figure out like what gets people excited enough to contribute, and then also like what do people really want to read about?
I think the other thing that's interesting about that you mentioned the 100K itself. I'm also generalizing here, but I feel like a lot of content folks, especially early on, are not paid very well, because they're like, they're writers. He's like, oh, this is pay them like, I don't know, per article or per word, or, below 50K. And that 100K number itself is something I would say maybe a lot of people aspire to, especially not in Silicon Valley, where like, if you're not making 100K, you're probably not eating well.
Totally.
But everywhere else, like 100K is like that. Like, here's my goal: get over 100K in my career.
Totally. You know, it's interesting you say that because you're so right. Like in other fields, that like 100K is like you're just graduated college, you're gonna make more than that. You know, and I think one of the things I hope to do with Superpath is legitimize the field of content marketing more so than it already is. I mean, I feel like it went from like a couple people blogging to like now basically every SaaS company has a content team. So that's like, I mean, that is legitimization for sure. But I feel like we need essentially a professional organization to advocate for people. And that's part of what I want Superpath to be doing more of. Developers have this, designers have this. And so it's easy for me to like look around and see like what resources does your average software engineer have access to that a content marketer doesn't, or same with a designer or product marketer, or, you know, people ops or any number of other fields that most SaaS companies would employ. And a lot of it is like, you have to give people the platform to speak and to share stuff so that you can, you know, you can kind of like create some order from the chaos.
I think the other thing about the legitimate piece is around salary discussion. I feel like, you know, by you opening this up, and I think you did a report once with like salary baselines, and I actually use it to like
We've done
negotiate.
it a couple of years, yeah.
Yeah, you should use it to negotiate my salary. It's like, oh, okay, this is what I'm aiming for based on this, because this is actually my first official content role under my name at AppQs, because I've been in director of training. I've done like, you know, growth marketer, but like it was very, very helpful. And I feel like that 100K club plus that reports that you're doing, you're enabling content marketers to give them like the data points to essentially ask for more. Like, you know, ask for, like, don't sell yourself short, essentially, because is potentially what other people are making. Is that
for sure?
Is that a fair thing to say?
Definitely. No, I think that's right on, because you're so right that most people come into the content marketing world not making very much money, and they may be frustrated when they see like, well, if I make 50K and I get a 10% raise every year, you know, like this is not the path I want to be on. But then if you could find that like, well, like, so we do a salary survey. We've done it 4 years in a row. We publish it every January. The average salary that we found this year was 95K. Like that's pretty good, you know, but there's outliers on both ends.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people making more than 300K. There's other people making, you know, 30K, but you can get a sense of all that. And then we also break it down by the years of experience, by job title, and a few other things. And again, it's just like gives people some understanding of like, what if I kind of pursue this for 3 to 5 years, I'll sort of put myself in this category, and those people are making 120K or something like that, you know? And so just transparency, you know what I mean? It's hard to find. Salary data is just hard to find anyways. And like everything I've seen on Glassdoor and Indeed, I don't feel like lines up with what I know people make.
Right.
Just in talking to a lot of content marketers. So yeah, we try to give people a lot of data. And I've actually had companies email me, and I've gotten like hate mail from people hiring content marketers being like, I hate your salary survey because everybody wants a raise now.
That is so funny. That's so funny. You actually got like hate mail. I would like frame that as badge of honor. Just be like, you know, I'm creating something useful enough that the people who are giving out salaries like hate my guts because I'm actually helping out your people, your content marketers who are actually being able to, you know, ask for more because of this.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, in some cases there is tension there because, you know, Superpath is the content marketer's advocate. That's what I want. We advocate for the individuals, but we make money from the businesses. And so that creates some tension from time to time. So like in that case, it was like a customer of ours, you know, like they're paying us money to help them do some stuff. And but I was like, hey, look, I'm going to stay true to, like with that, because the whole business runs off of a community. That's the foundation of it. And if that is not treated with respect and taken very seriously, then everything else falls apart that's built on top of it. So we're going to keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like if you don't pay market rates, then, you know, that you're going to have to figure that out.
I love how, so you're talking about this power for communities or like creating user generated content. I mean, I mean, other places you've talked about, it also helping around distribution, how it can help you. We've created this 100K content series or, other pieces of content, and you already got this community you built it for, and they risk the situation of them not resonating with it. So they're more likely to share it with folks. Would you say that?
Probably. I think the community has been less effective at distribution than I thought, actually.
Interesting.
I think when I think of like 15,000 people in a Slack group, I think of, what as a marketer, a content marketer, one of the things I think is, I bet we could get a lot of traffic on the site from those folks. That's not really true.
What?
We get, I think it's the medium, we send a newsletter to the same group of people. I think it's partially an issue of the medium, right? Like people don't join a Slack group to get content and click on stuff. They join to talk to people and learn things.
Yeah.
Through conversation, right? Like you can learn from a blog post, but it's not really what they're there for. Whereas like in the newsletter, like we send the newsletter to the same group of people essentially. And if you put a blog post in there, a lot of people click it.
Yeah.
So I found that to be interesting. I just expected that like when I looked in Google Analytics, the community would be a driver of quite a bit more traffic than it is. But the more valuable thing is not the data, it's the feedback you can get from people,
Right.
You learn a lot. Even if it's, we publish something and we just explicitly ask for feedback, like I'll get a couple people saying, here's what I thought and here's how you might do it differently next time. And that's gold. That's super valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you can make the content better and like you can figure out what the next steps are. I think that's the user generated and the feedback is like really the value of a community to the content is exactly what I'm hearing here.
Totally. And also, I mean, I'm talking a lot about user generated content, which is sort of just one way to go about this, but publishing user generated content is the best way to publish more user generated content. Like every time we publish 100K Club, another person or two reaches out and says, I want to contribute as well.
Yeah.
Which is great. And that kind of keeps that pipeline full.
You mentioned something earlier that kind of ties here where I feel like community also helps create that space. You mentioned space for people to share that 100K journey versus like if you didn't have community, sure, you might be able to get a few folks to share it, but there isn't that relationship already for them to trust maybe you or Superpath enough to say, hey, here's how much I made at this point, versus now you have this community who's like, yeah, I'd love to share. And they're actually raising up their hands and they want to share their journey next versus if you didn't have a community.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, that's totally true. Like you have to, oftentimes when we test stuff like this, because I mentioned like user generated content in particular, like some of it doesn't work. We've tried things that just don't work at all and they never caught on. Like I tried this one thing for a while called like, I forget what it was called. It was called the 5-minute webinar.
5-minute webinar.
Yeah. And the thing I wanted people to do was like record a Loom video for 5 minutes and explain something cool you've learned about content marketing. It just like didn't catch on at all. I thought it'd be really cool, but it didn't work at all. So like with one like this, we have to seed it with a couple 100K clubs before anybody sort of like you said, like trust it enough to then want to contribute themselves. So like there's a group of power users in the Slack community that I rely on quite a bit for stuff like this. I'll say like, hey, we're going to try something new. Like, are you up for it? I'll send you a hoodie or you know what I mean? Like I'll send you a Superpath t-shirt, like we've given away a lot of, like audiobook credits and like just little things that we try to do for people to thank them, because it's a small business. Like I'd love to like pay everybody like great rates for contributions like this, but like reality is we just can't.
Yeah.
So I try to show appreciation as much as I can in other ways.
You mentioned you've tried out stuff that hasn't really worked. You mentioned, what are some, I guess, like lessons if you could restart? One of the things you mentioned earlier before is like how the community should be run, like connecting it to who the community is for. Is there something around that you wish you knew earlier when you were starting out the Superpath community versus now?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like you're really actually tapping into something quite timely. The Slack community has grown far larger than I ever thought it would, but it's grown in a way that I didn't expect it to grow either. And what I mean by that is that we built this community for in-house B2B SaaS content marketers. And there's a lot of those folks in there. But it's also attracted a ton of freelancers. And this, like, I sort of noticed this trend and I was like, okay, cool. Like, we have a channel for freelancers. Like, people post freelance gigs. The freelancers want the gigs. I kind of get it. So like, we've catered to that a little bit, but like, I can't fully service both of those personas. And so, anyway, this sort of like put us at a little bit of a crossroads in a sense of like, we have 15,000 people in this free Slack community. We get 500 to 600 new people every month, which is wonderful.
Wow. Yeah.
But engagement is actually dropping, which I'm super surprised by. I just expected engagement to continue going up. But what's happened is the experience has become watered down.
Yeah.
And I can't keep up with it with that many people. And I can't, the management and the moderation piece, and also like you want to run good events, you want to publish good content. It's so difficult to keep up with all of those things. Yeah. And so I have been asking myself a lot recently, like, how would I have done this differently? And I kind of keep coming back to the answer of like, I didn't know this was going to happen. So it's like hard to look back and think about it differently. We're in the process of moving to a paid model for the community, which is a huge change for us. But in some sense, it's like us, it's a Superpath going back to our roots as like a small, somewhat exclusive community for in-house content marketers. We're still going to try to do some things for freelancers. Actually, our freelance channel, we're going to keep free. So anyone who wants to join it can join it. Yeah. The paid stuff is going to be like, you want to talk B2B SaaS content strategy, this is a place for it. You want to talk about how to manage a content team, this is a place for it, that kind of thing. But I have been wrestling with this a lot because it's raised all these questions of like, who is the community really for? Is it for that persona that I had in mind a couple years ago when I started this thing? What does the growth tell me about who actually wants to be here? Should that send us off in a new direction? I mean, I'm gaining some clarity on this as we think about this move to a paid, which, like I said, back to the roots, back to serving that core persona. But I've also spun my wheels quite a bit trying to make everybody happy. And I just like, I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that I can't do it. Not effectively anyways.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm part of the Superpath community, and I wouldn't mind paying to be part of a smaller group of communities. The problem I have with like being part of a large community is like I get nervous because like, oh my goodness, 15,000 people will see this. I think there's some psychology behind larger groups. I think there's a tipping point where people don't engage as much because I guess it's more like I'm nervous. Like you're at a big party, and should I say something? Should I not? I don't know.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. And I think that's part of the challenge we've seen with engagement dropping is that it's become kind of intimidating. Another thing that's happened kind of related to that is the initial group that we started with, which probably for the first year or two was like fairly senior content marketers. And like as the group has grown, it has the kind of average user is more junior. So it kind of went from like the first batch of people, it's like VPs and heads of content, and like now you might get someone who is just trying to get into the content industry for the first time, and they'll post questions in the in a channel and say like, whatever the question is. It's like a fairly basic question for a senior content marketer, but I think it turns off the senior content. Like in some cases, those people want to jump in and help, but they also then feel like it's not a place for them to ask a question.
Yeah. Interesting.
And, that's a whole nother thing I've been wrestling with. Ultimately, my conclusion there is like content marketing 101 is well documented. There's lots of great stuff out there on it. Some communities, lots of content has been published, obviously, but for the senior people, there's very little. And the best thing that I think we can do for them is give them a place to converse amongst peers and feel comfortable asking questions that they probably just wouldn't feel comfortable asking in a much larger environment,
That totally makes sense. I see that totally happening. So that, being connected, and the other super interesting like benefit to a paid community for Superpath is that now you can kind of weigh the feedback you get because the people who are paying probably have, I'm not sure. This is a hypothesis. Probably have like a stronger, valuable opinion than somebody who might not be. That could be especially if you're targeting like more senior folks in that community rather than in there might, I guess you cut down the noise is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely. And there's, it's a different mindset if you're, if you're there paying money, you expect your opinion to be heard. And I honestly, I do my best to listen. Like we ran a survey actually a couple weeks ago, and I let people know I'm thinking of moving to paid. Would you pay? Would you pay $15 or $20 a month for this community? And we got a ton of responses. And like I read through every single one. Like I genuinely care what people think. I found that folks who did not want to pay had very legitimate reasons for not wanting to pay. And it's not always like, I don't want to pay you $20. Like there's other reasons that they don't want to pay.
Interesting.
They want it to be accessible to everyone. They don't want it to be exclusively for people who can afford it. They feel like the community world is sort of like it's like, it's sort of like the unbundling of cable. It's like, you got to pay for a couple different memberships to get, to get information in different, like, I totally appreciate that. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I think of the folks who said they were willing to pay, the reasons they stated for it were kind of in line with what we've talked about. Smaller, more exclusive, deeper or kind of higher level type conversations. And like, that just gets me more excited at the end of the day. Like I want to facilitate that and participate in those more than I do, kind of, however you want to call it, sort of like more junior level stuff or trying to cater to too many people. Like, I just don't think I can do it effectively. And I think I'll probably run out of steam on it too. So
yeah, that's true. It totally makes sense. As well as like, I think, you've invested a lot of your time and your resources. And I think focusing on this paid community could be an interesting, so that you can do more cool stuff like, mastermind groups or, more interesting events or socials. So I think that's super exciting to the next generation, the next evolution of the Superpath, essentially.
For sure. It also creates a funding mechanism for us to invest, kind of reinvest in the community, which is going to be really important, I think. We've sold ads within the community, which is a whole nother thing.
Interesting.
It's been okay. But it's been just okay. Like it was an experiment. I would say it's one of those experiments that I'm like, man, it just didn't really pan out like I thought it would. And I think it's possible we work with like very limited number of partners in terms of advertising within the group, but it would be very limited. Yeah. Very targeted. So this will allow us to just do so much more for the community.
That's awesome. Well, I want to shift gears and talk about career power-ups and really like figure out what's helped you in your career. You've had, more than a decade of experience, stints as editor-in-chief at QuickBooks, VP of growth at Animals, and now you're co-founder and CEO here at Superpath. Curious, what's a superpower or a power-up that's helped you accelerate your career?
Yeah. The number one thing, I feel like my career was on like a fairly steady trajectory for a long time. And then there was a leap. And actually, interestingly, in looking at the 100K Club series, we make a chart for each person's salary progression, and there's always a leap. And we ask, one of the questions we ask is, what's the biggest salary jump you've ever made, either through a raise, promotion, or a job switch? And the number is usually a big one. It's not like I got a 10% raise. It's like I got like a $50,000 raise, and the jump that I experienced was joining Animals the second time I worked there in 2018, and we launched a blog. And that was, my job was launch the blog and start building this growth engine for Animals, which had to date relied primarily on referrals and word of mouth. And that was working, but like, you can't count on it forever and ever. So like, we wanted to build a proper growth engine. And the beautiful thing about content marketing is that your work is public, And so I wrote, over 2 years, I wrote maybe 50 blog posts for the Animals blog, and the blog got fairly popular and helped us bring in a lot of leads and close a lot of deals. But my name was on all the blog posts, and that was great for me. I mean, it's just like, it helped my career so much. And so the next thing I did was leave to go create Superpath. But like during that time, like a lot of those folks, they followed me on Twitter, or I had a personal newsletter and they signed up for the personal newsletter. And there's this kind of like trickle down of like, a lot of publishing in a prominent place on a subject matter I knew super well. And then as I made this transition to Superpath, a lot of those folks became the early members of Superpath. And that was a huge deal. That was also a job where I had my biggest salary jump. I had my biggest responsibility jump. I kind of like found myself in uncharted waters the most to, like trying to learn how to do things I had never done before. So there was kind of a lot wrapped up in there. I think the career power up piece though, is for content marketers specifically, publishing a lot of stuff with deep subject matter expertise in a very public way over a long period of time is a huge power up. Other industries or other fields, don't have this sort of public, public track record of all the work that you've done. But in content, you can have that. Your name and face can be on all of your work. And I think that's a really cool thing.
That's totally cool. Yeah. Publishing I feel like there's another one that's like tied up to what you mentioned around like you mentioned you were out of your element, but like that really like helped you kind of grow the most. It seems like there's another power up that I heard there where I guess you took the risk to step away from your comfort zone to actually embrace this new role that you might not have experienced before.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And a lot of what I was doing there was sales, which I had never done before. But it's a small business, like people are chipping in, trying to help everything get done. And kind of what happened was sort of writing these like thought leadership style articles on the blog. And then when folks would reach out to inquire about services, they want to know about this type of strategy that I talked about.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean? And so like an example would be like, we wrote a blog post about multi-product strategy. So like if you're a SaaS company, you have multiple products, how do you approach content strategy? Well, we had a bunch of multi-product SaaS companies reach out and they wanted to talk about it. And so like I would jump on those calls and we would talk through it. And then I became the sales guy sort of accidentally. And I was quite hesitant about it at first because I felt like, I've sort of spent 10 years building all my skills in content marketing. And now I'm like beginner salesperson. I don't know anything. Like if I spend time doing this, am I going to like kind of lose my edge on the content side, or is this going to take me down some other track I don't want to go down? But it turned out it was awesome because I got to talk so much to the people that we were trying to reach with our blog posts. And then I heard all kinds of things in these calls that I was like, oh, this is rich material. Like, and that gave us tons of new ideas for blog posts as well. And it just kind of became this like nice little growth circle where it's like, listen to what people say on calls, do some research, write about it. That gets more calls booked, talk to those people. You know what I mean? And so that worked extremely well. And for me, it was like, the thing I learned I wouldn't say I became an expert salesperson, but I learned how to listen very closely to customers, which is like a core content marketing skill.
I feel like what you just mentioned is now what you're doing at scale as Superpath.
Yeah, kind of.
Exactly right there. Like you're actually listening feedback, and was that the genesis of Superpath? I'm curious it's like that aha moment where like, you know what? Like me talking to these people, what if we did this at scale in a community? Or was it something else?
It's so interesting you say that. I've never thought about it that way, but it kind of makes perfect sense. I started the Slack group while I still worked at Animals, and it was just like a side thing. Yeah. I had no intentions to ever do anything serious with it. I just wanted a place to talk to peers. And so I made the Slack group. And I guess that's so interesting. Yeah. Cause I guess in some ways it's like, I got the same satisfaction out of those conversations that I did from sales calls, which they're like a little more high pressure, a little more formal. Whereas this was very informal and casual. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something like subconscious there that I've never really thought about that I think you tapped into.
That's interesting. I think the other thing that's interesting here is around, you wrote a bunch of content that is like, people are looking up to. And when you jumped on the call, were people starstruck? Like, here's Jimmy Daly who wrote this. And probably because of that, your close rate for the deals on calls were probably higher than if you weren't on it. Is that like a fair assumption?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really sure. The thing that I always tried to do with the sales calls was treat them like free consulting. You know what I mean? So it's like, I approached
Yeah.
the call like, hey, look, all I do all day is talk to people who run content programs at SaaS
Mm.
companies. Like, tell me about your problems. I'll like pull from all of my experience and knowledge of these other customers and try to get you some answers, And I feel like we really tried to lean heavily on the collective experience and knowledge of the company, because it's like you have account managers, you have writers, you have editors, all of them are interacting with customers. There's just so much knowledge to be gained from all of that. And we really tried to like collect all of that stuff. So that's like, if I'm going to get on a sales call, I can pull from as much of that as I possibly can versus like just winging it or, trying to rely only on like my own kind of narrow lane of expertise. But I do believe it helps when the person reads a blog post by a person and then they get on a call and they talk to that same person. I mean, it just, I don't have any data on that, but it helps.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I guess one final question in terms of giving an advice, but instead of to the listener, but to a younger version of you, what would be like one or two pieces of advice that if you can send back in time to a younger Jimmy who might be starting out in marketing would find that very helpful if that Jimmy actually listened and followed that advice?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think one thing I've thought about quite a bit recently is that at every different stage of my career, I kind of expected it. I expected it to get easier. You know what I mean? Like I expected I would get better at marketing and then things would be easier. They would sort of slow down a little bit. Like there's this, I remember a long time ago reading this article in Sports Illustrated about Joe Montana, like San Francisco 49ers quarterback. And I remember him describing like some reporter asked him like, you're not the fastest guy on the field. You don't have the strongest arm. Like, why have you what is it about you that has got you 4 Super Bowl rings? And he said that he sees the field in slow motion. And I thought that was so fascinating. It's like he was playing the game on easy mode while everyone else is playing it on hard mode. And I think I expected that as I got better at marketing, that things would slow down and become easier. And that's just never happened, because with each new stage comes a new challenge. And it's usually something you haven't done before, or it's happening at a scale you haven't dealt with before, or there's more people involved, or for whatever reason, it's different. You know what I mean? So I think that like when I was 25 and then 28 and then 30, I sort of always felt like I was on the cusp of reaching this level of expertise where stuff would just flow a little more easily. And that's just not the case. Superpath has like really proven that to be wrong. It's just like, it's always something new that I haven't done that's harder than the last thing. Cool. And I feel like maybe the thing I would have told myself is like, it's not going to get easier. And that's okay. Like that's sort of that part of the journey is like, just embrace the challenges. You'll get smarter and wiser. It won't get easier, but you'll be better at it, and other things, there will be other benefits, right? Like the better you are at it, the more you get to focus on what you like to do, or the more money that you make, or the more flexibility you have in your schedule, or kind of these other things that are really become super important. Like you don't really actually want it to be easy. You want autonomy and flexibility and control and money and whatever other the things are. So I think that, I think about that a lot now. I think my younger self probably would have benefited from that knowledge.
That's so good. I feel like that's something that a lot of people need to hear, especially early on. I guess like maybe it was just me where like I'm trying to rush myself to get to that point where like everything becomes easy. And like that undue pressure causes more pressure on top of everything else.
Totally. That's so true that like, you feel like, why isn't this easier? Or why isn't it?
Should I work harder to make it easier? Or like, should I work more hours or do this or that? And that causes more problems.
Totally. Interestingly, tying this back to the 100K Club, a lot of folks talk about like hitting moments of frustration and then breakthroughs. And I think that's probably important too, because like when you're in that mode of like, I'm almost there, like you actually might be, but the breakthrough probably isn't that anything's easier, but it could be a career breakthrough, a new role, a better company to work at, better benefits, more money or whatever.
If you enjoyed this episode, you'd love the Marketing Powerups newsletter. I share the actionable takeaways and break down the frameworks of world-class marketers. You can go to marketingpowerups.com to subscribe and you'll instantly unlock the 3 best frameworks that top marketers use to hit their KPIs consistently and wow their colleagues. I want to say thank you to you for listening, and please like and follow Marketing Powerups on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you feel extra generous, kindly leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and leave a comment on YouTube. It goes a long way in others finding out about Marketing Powerups. Thanks to Mary Sullivan for creating the artwork and design, and thank you to Faisal Taigo for editing the intro video. And of course, thank you for listening. That's all for now. Have a powered up day.
Marketing Power-Ups. Until the next episode,